So, have you ever noticed this? You change just a few words in a prompt. The core question feels exactly the same, but the answer you get back is completely different. Well, that's not a glitch. It's a signal, and we're going to break down the mechanics behind it.
And this, right here, is the central idea. An AI doesn't answer what you mean to ask, it executes the precise instructions that your specific wording creates. You see, you're not really having a conversation, you're designing an input.
Okay, let's dive into the first mechanism. Your prompt isn't just a question. Think of it more as the blueprint for the answer's reality. Your words are literally building the world the AI has to operate in before it generates a single word.
You know, we have to remember that these language models don't really grasp abstract meaning. They are, at their core, masters of statistics. For any given string of words, they're just calculating the most probable next word. Your prompt isn't just a starting line. It sets the entire trajectory for this whole chain of probability.
This slide just illustrates the principle perfectly. Look at the prompt on the left. It's not really asking if remote work is better, it's commanding the model to generate justifications for why it is. But the prompt on the right? It sets up a completely different job, a balanced evaluation. The topic is identical, but the operational instruction is just fundamentally different.
So here's the crucial point. You're not just asking for information. You are actively pruning the tree of possible answers right from the very start. With your initial phrasing, you're defining the boundaries and the expected shape of the response.
All right, let's move on to the next layer. This is where we see how this whole system becomes a high-fidelity amplifier for the cognitive biases that are already baked into the language we use every day.
So when a prompt uses loaded terms like best, or it contains some kind of implicit assumption, that's not just a subtle hint, it's a massive statistical signal. The model's training data has taught it to associate these kinds of linguistic patterns with very specific types of responses, so it just aligns its output to match that pattern it's learned.
And this really captures the result perfectly. The model doesn't invent bias out of thin air. It just efficiently amplifies the bias that you already injected into the prompt. That feeling you get when an output feels correct, oftentimes that's just the model confirming your own cognitive frame right back to you.
And now for our third mechanism. Let's take a look at how the actual structure of your question doesn't just ask for an answer, it commands a specific mode of thinking. Think of it like you're providing a very precise set of navigational instructions.
This table shows it so clearly. Ask why, and you trigger causal justification. Ask how, and it immediately initiates a process explanation. What if launches a simulation. You see, these aren't just synonyms. They are distinct operational commands that engage completely different reasoning pathways inside the model.
So the takeaway here is that changing your question from why is X effective to how is X effective, well, that's not a minor tweak. You have fundamentally altered the entire task from one of justification to one of process mapping. The model is going to follow the path you define, even if the topic stays exactly the same.
So we've seen the mechanisms at play. Now let's connect all of that to the real-world cost of unintentional framing versus the strategic edge you can gain from conscious, deliberate input design.
You know, poor outputs are rarely the result of a single catastrophic failure. It's more like an accumulation of small instructional misalignments. Each vaguely worded prompt, each unexamined assumption, they all compound, and they lead to flawed analysis and a ton of frustration, which often gets blamed on the tool instead of the input.
The edge that experts seem to have, it isn't about some secret keywords or a magic template. It's a fundamental shift in their mental model. They basically stop having a conversation and start designing a system. They define their goal first, then they consciously engineer the prompt to constrain the model toward that specific outcome, and they always treat the first output as just a testable prototype.
So, as we close out, I want to leave you with 3 questions to apply to your own work. First, what assumption is embedded in the way you are asking the question?
Second, are you designing for neutrality, or are you deliberately steering the answer? And look, neither one is wrong, but that choice, it has to be a conscious one.
And finally, here's a practical test. How would the output change if you completely inverted the framing? Seriously, try it. Ask for the exact opposite of your original query and just see what new landscape that simple change reveals.